Trade was always one of the biggest issues surrounding Brexit. But the real key issue was the fact that Brexiteers just didn't understand trade and how modern trade works. And especially modern trade deals, which are all about sharing sovereignty. You give a bit of sovereignty and we'll give a bit of sovereignty in return, but it's beneficial to us both. And no more is this more evident in the ongoing talks with India. Now, India itself, if you know anything about their economy or indeed the politics of India, India is very, very much on a drive of we can be self-sufficient. We do not need, trade deals with outside countries. And as a result, again, India can indeed be incredibly self-sufficient because of, again, it has lots of access to raw resources and all kinds of stuff. And historically, they have proven that again as well. People want to go to India to sell their products to their market, not vice versa. And so we have a small economy, this being the UK, now want to try and crack this India nut. But of course, as was said back post-Brexit, when again, oh my God, we're going to re-engage, we're going to go revisit our former Commonwealth friends, we're going to re-engage with them. Remember, India came out and said, we're not going to be your imperial bazaar. And one of these things that this article especially goes into just goes to show you how, in fact, difficult these trade deals and negotiations really are. And it's something that a lot of people really just do not understand, how difficult trade deals really are, or even understand the complexities of doing these deals, because they were just seen as, especially in Brexit, oh, you can just, walk into a country and just, start, whack out a trade deal willy-nilly. But no, that's not the case. That is not the case at all. Most modern trade deals take years to do. This is why what was so worrying that the Australian trade deal that we've just basically done from scratch basically gave Australia everything it wanted, and we got pretty much nothing in return. So now that you want to try and do this deal with India, which again I do not think is going to happen, because again, no one so far has managed to, shall we say, crack the egg that is the Indian trade subcontinent. But this is, again, a very interesting article that goes in on that, and it shows that, again, we probably have no chance either, considering how small we are as this. So let's go diving into this from BBC News, with the title of Scotch Whisky on the Table in Trade Talks with India. And of course, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those who support the channel that way. So let's dive into this. So a bottle of Scotch whisky arriving in the port of Mumbai faces a colossal 150% import tariff. Yeah, it hasn't stopped Indians from being enthusiastic drinkers of a dram. India is the world's biggest market for whiskey, most of it termed Indian-made foreign liquor. The big brands sound more like Seapside than subcontinental: McDowell's, Royal Stag, Bagpiper, and Peter Scott. Domestic distilleries have lobbied very fiercely and successfully to limit Scotch imports. If a bottle is sold in Mumbai or elsewhere in the state of Maharashtra, it would carry a further 300% tariff, though it was recently halved. Among other parts of the Indian Union, some do not even allow alcohol sales at all, except those who know how to get around the rules. Scotch whisky makes up just 2% of India's market. Yet, the value of Scottish whisky sales to India has risen from below 6 million in 2011 to around 150 million in 2019. That has been on the soaring growth of both the economy and the country's burgeoning middle class, with its drought of prestige international products and brands. But by volume, last year saw India become the third largest market for the Scottish whisky. By as much as 60% of it is now in bulk from bottling in India, or for blending with local spirits that is a lower value Scotch that exported to other markets. So imagine what could be sold with lower tariffs. There is a big prize from getting them removed, or at least slashed. And that puts whisky firmly on the table for talks, which began this week, aimed at a free trade agreement between the UK and India. Oxford Economics don't imagine what could be sold, but it models it, commissioned by the Scottish Whisky Association. It assumes that the import tariffs could come down to at least 25%. With that, it estimates that at least 1.2 billion more exports within 5 years, and that could generate at least over 1,000 jobs here in the UK. And as part of the pitch to the Indian government, that such trade liberalisation would only take Scottish from 2% to around 6% of the nation's consumption, while boosting the Delhi's own government revenues by more than at least £3 billion. That way, everyone wins. But, and it is a big but trade liberalisation is not that simple, particularly in India. One of the first problems is getting an agreement on the valuation of an import consignment before it even leaves the port. That can take a very long time. And a free trade deal would have to try and actually simplify that process. So the application of the rules can be, let's say, very unpredictable. One key part of any free trade deal would be a court of arbitration. But as the Edinburgh-based Cairn Energy found, it recently rebranded to Capricorn, such as existing international rules on investment can get stuck in Indian bureaucracy and legal obstacles. Having developed the country's biggest oil field and sold its stake, Cairn's attempt to reclaim at least $1 billion owned by the Delhi tax authorities only began to make progress after it started action to seize the government's overseas assets. So after leaving the port, imports of whiskey into India then hit by at least 30 different markets across India's states, requiring different labeling and different duty and retail rules. Some states have a government non-monopoly on retailing alcohol, which is due to abuse by those in power. Those in the distilling industry, who has also been trying to break down the barriers to trade, have very low expectations of those internal trade barriers being removed after a deal between the UK government and then the federal trade ministry in Delhi. A deal between the national governments could be a big breakthrough, but it would just be a start of a brand new chapter of actually trying to break this market. After 10 years of the European Union trying but failing to get a free trade deal, in which the Scottish whisky also played a very prominent part, there is also some optimism that the mood in India has shifted. The crucial part is that the domestic distilling industry now has more international ownership. The flamboyant businessman Vajana Mali, I think that's how you say it, who bought the Scotch distiller Walter Mackay, has added to India's biggest distiller, United Spirits. Along with this, his empire of brewing, a large airline, a Premier League cricket, a Formula One team, and is all set also has a seat in India's parliament, which is out of the picture now. Living in London, the sun has indeed set on his empire, and he's fighting extradition to his homeland to face charges of money laundering on a vast scale. Much of the United Distilleries is now owned by Delago, a London headquartered global drinks giant, which also happens to own around at least 40% of Scottish production. So it is a big player in the Indian distilling and in the Scotch one as well, plus gin, tequila, rum, and Guinness, which it would dearly love to get into the Indian market. By no coincidence, Indian distillers seem to be putting up less lobbying resistance to imports of Scotch. So, would this potentially be a breakthrough for the Scotch into the world's biggest whisky market? The UK government, with its newish Trade Secretary Anne-Marie Trevelyan, is eager to show the progress of post-Brexit on reaching beyond Europe trade to global Britain. But there isn't much prospect of a breakthrough deal anywhere else. Whitehall brings It's inexperience at the table. Well, India's trade negotiators have lots of experience. Much of it is refusing to compromise due to domestic politics and an undercurrent of belief that India can be self-sufficient. The trade talks are also likely to feature the desire of Britain's financial sector to try and get into the Indian market as well, to which it currently is only a tenth of its sales to Japan. That would require the dismantling of the massively complex regulatory barriers. Its legal trade body, the City UK, wants to see fewer restrictions on data flows and visas for British nationals to work at least temporarily in India. Having seen Kane Energy and others snared, it is also seeking protections from investments. The car industry is also, including Indian-owned Jaguar Land Rover, wants to get access to wealthy customers now on the subcontinent. And India also has its own negotiating priorities, starting with much lower barriers for its professionals to work in the UK. The view of the world trade is projection of power of the Indian diaspora, a huge English-speaking pool of technical skills and entrepreneurial flair. But welcoming many more Indians into Britain could be seen as running counter to the spirit of Brexit, which was to keep foreign workers out. This would be a very tricky compromise for the UK government to sell to its supporters, one of which the Home Secretary is Priti Patel, herself a daughter of that Indian diaspora, and is also reportedly to be firmly against. So, and bear in mind, we've also seen very recently that this trade deal would be worth like 0.12%, which again is tiny. Remember, we're losing 4% on just our current trade situation with the EU. So all these, you may very well notice that all these trade deals that we're doing are literally less than 1%. Remember, even though we're talking big trade deals, those like 0. Percentage deals, of course, at least we're talking hundreds, if not millions of pounds. But the thing is, when you're talking 1%, that's where you go into billions, if not trillions of pounds. So remember that we've lost 4% of our trade deal, and now we're trying to replace this deal with basically nickel and dimes compared to the should we say pounds that we've lost from the deal, from leaving the EU and the single market. So again, this just goes to show you how very little Brexiteers and the government and the inexperience now that is very clearly on offer here to show this. Even the Australian trade deal is something like 0.02%, I believe, something like that. So it's nothing in the grand scheme of things. But of course, the big question is just as we pretty much rolled over for Australia, is Britain also going to completely roll over for India now? What could the consequences be of accepting a trade deal? What will India ask for in return? Obviously, we've seen demand for greater visa access, which is going to be seen as a very, very negative view in the, shall we say, in the minds of not only the Brexiteers, but the Brexit voting public as well. I said before, the question is what else would India ask for? Ultimately, it would be greater access for agricultural materials, which again would be throwing the farmers of the UK yet again under the bus, and potentially even more stuff as well, which could again harm the domestic market and domestic producers here in the UK even more. We've also got to remember, and a lot of people still really don't realize this, India is still very much in the midst of going through its industrial revolution. As bizarre as that sounds, that is the case of where they are. They have a very massive burgeoning middle class now, which gets bigger and bigger every year. They are one of the certainly most populous countries in the world with a massive potential market. And we are a far, far smaller market. And as we've always said, any trade deals that are done, the bigger market has all the power. And yet Brexiteers would love to say, oh, look at us, we're going to get a deal with this market, we're going to get all this wonderful stuff, but don't really tell the truth of what is actually being asked for. And like I say, an advantage to the UK GDP of adding like 0.12% is in fact a tiny amount from what we have just lost from leaving the EU and the single market customs union. So again, while it's going to be, quote, talked up as a victory for global Britain if this does indeed happen, the trade deal itself will have far-reaching consequences for here in the UK. And one of the things that I've said before that a lot of people in the UK are going to have to be getting very used to are the consequences of said trade deals. We've already seen that farmers are incredibly upset with how the government is treating them, and especially that Australian trade deal. And essentially, if they get seen to say throwing them yet underneath the bus again of yet another trade deal, then the Tories are already losing farmers' support very, very, very fast. It could all pretty much evaporate if they are seen to be doing deals which are again damaging the owned UK industry. Not only that, but other industries, as I said, I think are going to start to be more political and start speaking out against these trade deals and saying, hey, this is going to damage domestic production, which is eventually going to damage, UK jobs. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.